this needs a very serious debate and discussion. Thank you so much, David, for joining in. We are discussing a lot on the rise of grooming incidents in the UK. It is worrying because they are targeted primarily at girls who are not from one particular religion. Girls as young as 11 have become victims. And do you know what is worrying? That instead of showing empathy and shedding tears, we are not blaming the perpetrators, but we hold the victims responsible and ask them to shut up for cultural diversity. Yeah. Where on earth are we heading, David, with this?
Well, that's a very good question. And first of all, hello, Nandini, and nice to see my friend Arif on the video as well. The answer is that we're heading into a very dark place. That's where we're heading. The awful reality is that these horrific practices are happening all over the country. We probably only are aware of, I think, probably a small element of them. I suspect it's pretty much widespread, and there's a reason for it. And I mean, fundamentally, the reason is that the British establishment, the political establishment in particular, but also other parts of the establishment, the cultural establishment, the media establishment, they're scared, they're frightened. They will not acknowledge that which is literally happening in front of their very eyes. They will not acknowledge things that they're fully aware of. I mean, it's not that they don't know about these things, Nandini. They do. They've been told. The victims have told them what goes on. But they're so scared that they will do nothing. And that's why, and this is something I've said quite a lot recently, you know, if you encourage bad behavior, what you get is even more bad behavior. So when this kind of barbarism happens in our communities and we don't stop it, we will get more of it. And that's why we need to take very, very robust action against those practitioners of this savagery. And, you know, I know you call it people call it love jihad. There's no love in this. It's hate jihad. It's hate jihad. And, you know, when you enter a world where the victims are treated as if they're the culprits, then it's time to step back and think, just where is this country going and what do we need to do to stop it?
Rightly said, David. And I think what is very worrying is that, you know, at one end we talk of feminism, women in the 21st century. But what is happening is that when you have things like Me Too movement, a lot of, you know, things like that come out. Why not this? Why is you have this nexus or this racket where you have police involved, where you have people who should be protecting these girls from, you know, the social services. They are involved. Who on earth can you trust now? Is the question here?
Yeah, well, the answer is you have to be very careful who you can trust, because a lot of that trust, for example, I know some of the victims, and they trusted the police. They went to the police. They went to their local politicians and they said, look, this is what's happening. They provided names, they provided details, they provided the graphic, awful realities of what goes on. They did all that and they were betrayed. And the people that betrayed them, in my view, there's only one place for those people: behind bars. At a minimum. But that's not really happened very much. And, you know, you mentioned the feminist #MeToo movement. They've been nowhere because they don't care. They're not bothered. You know, it's okay if you want to make allegations against Hollywood film producers. That's one thing. That's one degree of virtue signaling. But when it comes to vulnerable girls, of all faiths, actually, and indeed no faiths, being abused in the way that we know, you know, there's no good media headlines in that. You're not going to be welcomed into the salons of the political establishment if you actually talk about the fact that, guess what? In the UK, in those heavily Muslim communities, there is a nightmare problem going on and we have to deal with it. Trust me, if you say that, the doors are shut. You will not be welcomed into the establishment. I'm sure Arif can vouch for this. These are uncomfortable topics, Nandini. This is the issue. They're uncomfortable. They make people not very happy. In certain areas, for example, a lot of these activities have happened in areas which are, I guess you would call them Labour. The Labour Party kind of dominates in some of these areas at any rate. But the difficulty for the Labour Party is that the Labour Party relies on the vote bank from the very same groups that are carrying out the barbarism. So, think about that one. That's why people are told to shut up for the sake of diversity. Forget diversity. It's not about for the sake of diversity. It's for the sake of votes. That's what they mean. Shut up for the sake of our votes. Because if you raise the spectre of this barbarism, then that reflects badly on a group that votes for us. That's where Labour are, and that's why they've been so horrendously silent in most cases. But in other cases, like in the instance you mentioned, the particular MP, quite keen to blame the girls for daring to actually talk about that which they've gone through. And, when you hear the things that they go through, it's almost unbelievable, Nandini. The abuse that they've encountered is not something that in a civilized first world country should ever be happening. But it is. And I'll tell you what, it's happening today, and it'll happen tomorrow, and it'll happen until such times as our politicians, or at least the political leaders, find the courage to stand against it, regardless of the consequences. Because as you see, in France, for example, yesterday, when you stand against things, there are consequences. And some of those consequences are not very nice, as we saw in Nice. In the UK, if we stand against the abuse of these girls through hate jihad, then I'm sure there will be consequences too. But that's the lesser of two evils. You've got to stand against evil. If you don't, you get more evil. That's how I think about it.
Thank you so much, David. But I think what is worrying is that you just mentioned that this is happening in primarily labor areas. You cannot choose where you live, right? So if you are living in an area where, what can we do as individuals that these are highlighted more, these are discussed more, because this is affecting a lot of people, like just you and me, normal people going on with their life, having nothing to do with religion or what a particular religion teaches. It is just getting on, having a normal life. We do not know what is this vote bank or that politics or appeasement politics or secularism or this, that. We just want to be the girls to be respected, rightly so. But then what we are like stuck in the situation. What more can be done so that this is debated, this is discussed, and this is addressed as soon as possible?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Nandini, and I guess there's a couple of points to be made. One of the problems we have is that we have foolishly, in my view, allowed certain parts of our cities and towns to become ghettoized. You talk about diversity. There's no diversity in certain areas. It's 100% one community and one community only. And it's within that community where the problem exists. So that's one of my reasons why I kind of take a view. If people aren't prepared to integrate into our communities in the UK, we have to ask, why are they here? Why do you come if you won't integrate and contribute to our communities? These grooming gangs, this is not the contribution we want from people who come from other countries. If you want to import barbarism from overseas, then back overseas is where I suggest you probably need to go, because you're not making a positive, contribution to British society. So we have to be very careful, Nandini, who we let into this country, and are we importing more of the same problem that we're actually talking about? And I think the answer to that is, yeah, we are. And so we need to stop it. So that's one thing that we could do. The second thing we need to do is we do need to look very closely at those communities where this practice flourishes. And we need to take robust action. I want to see people, anyone, convicted of these crimes should be put away for life. Preferably, they should be deported as well, if that's possible. We need shot of them. We need them rid of from our country. We need our country cleansed. We need to send the message into these areas, Nandini, that we're just not going to tolerate it. If we find that you have been involved in any way in these activities, then you're going to jail for life, or better, you're getting out of this country. That's a couple of strong political messages and practical things we can do to help the girls concerned. And I think, that's where we look to politicians for leadership. But actually, I don't see a lot of leadership amongst our political class. I, as I say at the beginning of this, I consider them to be cards mostly. And never, we talked about Labour for a second, Nandini, but the truth is that on the Conservative side of the aisle as well, which is the governing party, there's quite a few Conservative MPs reliant on voter banks. And that also means that they remain mute whilst all this is happening. So, the first step you can take in dealing with the problem is to recognize that you've got a problem, right? Yeah. That's step one. Yeah. I think we're still on the verge of not having fully recognized that this is a problem. It's growing. It's prevalent across the UK. It's not just, the well-known towns that we know. I mean, London, for example, you never hear much about the grooming gangs of London. I wonder why that might be. Strange that, isn't it? We've heard about Rotherham. We know about, all that goes on in some of these other towns. I reckon there are vast grooming gangs operating that we don't even know about. And the reason we don't know about them is because those communities in which they operate keep mute about it. They won't talk about it. I think eventually the lid will come off and we'll find out. But as I say, practical steps mean the rigorous application of the law in these areas, rooting out the culprits, deporting them or putting them behind bars, making sure we don't bring any further such people into this country, closing down any business enterprises they're in, making them suffer economically. That's how we do it. We have to show a bit of muscle in this country, and stand up for the pluralist values that I'm sure we all want. We want people of all faiths, and that includes the Muslim faith, all faiths to be able to exercise their faith. That's all fine, but we're not going to put up with these savage practices and this abuse of some of the most vulnerable young people in this country.
Actually, yeah, very, very, very rightly said, David. Very vulnerable young girls. But there is another aspect of it. We see a lot of this happening with terms of moral policing, where girls are being constantly told when they are in these areas that they need to cover up, they need to dress more decently. Mm-hmm. This is the way they are. Why are the girls told what they need to wear, what they need to dress up? Why are the men not? So this is like a question going out to you, Arif and to David, that why are only girls always told what they need to do? Don't these men need to wake up to this?
Well, if I can just go first before Arif, just very quickly, I'll tell you why. Because it's a deeply misogynist culture. That's why. A misogynist culture which doesn't equate men and women, boys and girls equally. That's why. And that's why actually it really has no place in our British society. We value young ladies, young men, equally, equality and all of that. But this culture doesn't, Nandini. And until we recognize that, we're living in a fool's paradise. Arif?
Well, David, I totally agree with you. But this is the way we are developing this society, especially in England. In Britain, I can see that one Anjum Chaudhary, he is implicated. Everyone knows he is terrorist. Now he is living on taxpayers' money. We are nurturing such terrorists here. We are allowing telethons for 2-3 hours to collect jihad money. So I had a question for you also, David, that how long this appeasement will go? France continued this appeasement for decades, and now France is obliged to use power. Do you think Boris Johnson government has this guts to come? Because one day they have to fight this maniac. One day they have to do it. Do you think current government will do it?
Very valid question, Arif. Very valid question. Yes.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the reality in France is France sat back for far too long. It has got a massive problem, which I'm sure we all understand. I feel sorry for Macron at one level because I mean, France is the most populous Muslim country in the EU, even more than the UK. But the UK is not that far behind. So, look, you're right. What we see in France is kind of what we're going to see here as well. And we're not very far behind, actually. I mean, look at what happened at the Manchester Arena. Look what happened in London Bridge. So we know that we have the same problem. And you're right, Arif, that, you know, fine words will not solve it. That's why I've said on social media in the past 24 hours, you know, lighting up the Eiffel Tower won't stop any more attacks. What will stop more attacks is, for example, the guy who decapitated the people in the Nice Basilica yesterday, he came across from Tunisia through Lampedusa in Italy, straight across the border, along the Côte d'Azur, into Nice, into the Basilica, and cut the people's heads off. Where was the border control? Why was he allowed into even Italy? This was an illegal migrant. So, you know, force has to be required. Force to repel them at the borders, Arif. We need that. And if they get through the borders, hunt them down and send them out. Get rid of them. And that requires, unfortunately, I guess, you know, not just political power, but military muscle and determination. And that's what I don't see that in France particularly, and I certainly don't see it here. I don't know. Do you see any evidence of it here, Arif?
No, nothing at all, David. This is happening here, as you mentioned, on London Bridge, in Manchester. These things happen. Now, restricting border is okay. But what about the people who are already here? Tariq Fatah just now posted a video of a Muslim Brighton, who is openly saying that we will behead anyone who is insulting our prophet. Is this British law? No, it is not British law. This is a free society. So how long we will continue? We have to use iron fist against these people.
Well, you're right, Arif, and actually you mentioned law, and that's a fundamental thing. I completely believe in the law of the country prevailing, and there's no place for Sharia law in the United Kingdom, no place whatsoever, and yet it's been indulged. It has been allowed to operate in the shadows. It needs to be cleansed, and those who would exercise Sharia need to understand that, well, you need to go to some country, you know, try it somewhere else, but not the UK. We don't want you. And actually, if that applies across Europe, Europe is a secularist state, set of countries. And so there's no room for Sharia in that, but yet it has flourished. So you're right. You can't have parallel systems of jurisprudence in any country. So we need to sort of assert British law in every way, and if certain groups can't accept that, and you're right, Arif, some don't. I mean, you mentioned, but I mean, here's what I'll just, Nandini, indulge me in this one. We saw after the events in France yesterday in Nice, we saw the former Prime Minister of Malaysia. I'm sure you saw him. He actually tweeted. And it was allowed it's funny, he's allowed on Twitter, but I'm not. He tweeted that Muslims should have the right to kill as many French people as possible. What? And this is a prime minister of a prominent country. So if that's how he thinks, do you think that view is held more widely amongst many people here in that community? And I fear the answer is absolutely yes. So what it all comes down to, Arif, is yes, you're right. You know, we need to have iron action taken against this, and that's not what's happened. That's why the grooming gangs have flourished. There was no action taken. To Nandini's point, they sat back and just looked the other way, but that's meant that there's, you know, the abuse gets greater, and so we need to stop it. Enough of this. Just enough. It's like the French. You know, how many people have to be murdered before you realize you've got a real problem with jihadi? And frankly, you know, Jihad cannot coexist with us, Arif. I'm sure you agree. Either they win or we win. Well, I know which side I'm on.
But David, 1 minute. I have one more thing. The inquiry committee that is investigating the Manchester bombing. The officer said that I knew that this person is ambiguous. So I wanted to stop, but I was afraid that I will be called racist.
Yes.
Now, how long the state officers will be afraid? Why are you afraid? One day you have to fight them. These monsters, you have to fight them. When will this happen?
Whenever we get to the point where we can just shrug off accusations of racism. The accusation of racism, which has been pushed by what I consider the media by, for example, those who push Islamophobia. It's the same people. To paralyze us, so we can't, Arif, where or many people anyway, are scared to say things because they will then be labelled as racist. And at the Manchester Arena, I mean, it's shocking when you actually understand the details of what happened. That could have been prevented. All those young girls' lives and parents that lost their lives could have been saved had this country not been so obsessed about, I mustn't be seen as a racist. But, frankly, when they throw the word racist at you, it shuts you down. I was shut down on social media, on Twitter, as you know, folks, because they called me a racist. And why did they call me that? Just to shut me up. And it worked. And it works. And it'll continue working until people waken up to figure out that there's only two sides in this. There's only two sides. The sides of civilization and the sides of the barbarians who cut the heads off people in French Basilica, or who abuse young girls systematically in ways that are just beyond words. There's only one side, two sides, and you got to pick one. I know where, and I'm sure we all know where we stand in that.
I'm sure, David, there are many like you and me was seeing and, feeling this. See, like we saw it when, things like CA and NRC happened, what happened outside the Indian High Commission. Mm-hmm. So you have this whole, at one end you have the victim card, the other end you have the racism card. So either ways you look at it, you want to control it. And that is where things are going wrong. You have politicians who have got into the trap. You have the government services who has got into the trap. How on earth, unless we make some radical reforms, make some radical changes, which sends out a very strong message, loud and clear to these people, we are stuck with it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And actually, you mentioned the High Commission there. I saw some stuff on social media a day or so ago. People preparing to go down outside the High Commission and protest against, as they see, the occupation of Kashmir and whatnot. These people are very organized, Nandini. They're organized. They don't fear. They for one reason they're so confident to go to the High Commission in London is they know that in Sadiq Khan they've got a firm ally. So that's one reason why London suffers so egregiously. But they're confident, and that confidence comes from the fact that, as you point out, no one's really stepped up and said enough. No one stepped up to them and said, no, you can't do this. No one said, we will not tolerate this. The scenes outside the High Commission last year, they're going to be repeated again on such times as the British government and Boris Johnson actually, get serious about dealing with the problem. And the biggest thing that annoys me, I'll tell you, most of all, is when I look at groups in the UK that do integrate, people like Arif, people who have integrated and contribute. It annoys me so much that I see the people who have integrated and contribute to our society, and they're the people that get pilloried and demonized. And the people who have not integrated and have no interest in making this a better society, they're the people that get away with it. And that's the fundamental injustice. So we do need to bring justice for the girls of the grooming gangs. We need to bring justice for them. And we need to bring the wrath of British justice against those people who have indulged in such practices, those people who would plan jihad attacks, those people who don't respect Britain. If you don't like Britain, go somewhere else. Some politician needs to say that. But I don't know about you, Arif, but I'm still waiting to hear that from the political establishment.
You know, David, you have hit a very valid point there, because when you speak against it, you are thrown out of that social media.
Yeah.
So what is worrying is something like you said, like something like if you say something which is, you know, talking about grooming, or if RFG says, or anything, anybody else takes it up, it's very, very easy to shut you off, because that is not what people want.
Yeah.
So when these kind of things happen, how will the voices go out? We saw that with the New York Post article, how Jack Dorsey, how Facebook. So there is this silencing technique that the minute you speak, that they do not want to listen to. Something like you said, the grooming incidents, or the Hunter Biden incidents. But what is happening is these young girls have become soft and easy targets. It's their lives destroyed.
Yes, right. I mean,
what will we do, and how do we correct this?
I was at an event in London just 2 years ago, just under 2 years ago, with a group of the Rotherham survivors. And, you know, you listen to, you meet with these girls, and you hear the stories, and you understand what they've gone, and they've been damaged so much, Nandini. You know, you cannot go through that level of systemic sexual abuse and not be probably damaged for life, actually. But the thing that got me about them was, to your point, they're sort of saying, but who will listen to us? And they found it very hard to get anybody in positions of power to actually listen to them. So the British establishment has its ears shut. These are shut. They've got their ears closed. They've got their eyes shut, and got their mouths shut as well to the victims. And that's because they're scared of the victim makers. And that's the awful reality of it. Big tech media as well. You know, these conversations they're not easy conversations, the ones we're having, but they're important. In fact, I think they're crucial conversations. As I say, if you talk about things, you can work towards solutions. If you don't, the things just fester and get worse. So one of the things I hope it happens next week is President Trump gets reelected. I hope that he cracks down on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube for their censorship, for their covering up of important issues, and allows free speech to prevail. So people like us and others may in a civilized fashion, but with passion, talk about the things that matter. Because at the moment, as you say, the likelihood is, if I said any of this on Twitter, I would have been, they would have taken me down anyway, because they won't allow discussion. Discussion is a mark of a healthy, I'm sure we would agree, a healthy society.
Need to have discussions, and we need to talk about these. So just because the victims were not a particular vote bank, you disown them. This is exactly what happened here. Yes. And we're seeing this, and it is not just Rotterdam. You've got Huddersfield. There are so many of these incidents. Yes. Every other week, every other day, you have one incident or the other incident coming out. You cannot shut up. You have to talk about this. And that is what is worrying. Do we need something like when the girls start in the higher school, when they start 11 plus in the senior school, there needs to be a proper education, a proper awareness campaign that this happens and this can happen anywhere and this can happen to any girl. We need to work on that campaign very aggressively, very strongly to keep our girls safe.
I think we also need to have a way whereby any girl who feels that she's being abused can find a way to get that information out. There needs to be like a national hotline, national ways in which those girls can get their story out quickly, so that it's solved quickly. And we don't really have that as well. There's so much that could be done, Nandini. There's lots that we could do, but the will to do it is the thing that's most missing. There is little will to do it. And, as you say, at a time when we talk about equality and all these things and diversity, yet when it comes to this issue, there is a distinct reluctance for people to want to talk about it. And that's because ultimately it points the finger in one particular community's direction. And that is the community which is the fastest growing community in the UK, which is showing that it's not tolerant of others in some regards. And that's the essence of the problem.
Arif ji, your thoughts on this?
Well, I totally agree. And as he mentioned that this is fastest growing community, so they have their means to grow so rapidly. They target non-Muslim wombs to produce Muslim children. And as Nandini ji, you also said that this is an appeasement of a particular vote bank, and the other vote bank is not important. That I agree. When I was living in Belgium, I came once to England and I met an MP, member of parliament from Boris Johnson's party. And I told him that why don't you raise this issue of Taliban terrorism in parliament? I gave him so many things, too much material. And he said, hey, gentlemen, do you know how much Muslim voters I have? Openly, he told me.
Yeah.
I won't name him, but he openly said that I cannot because I have so many Muslim voters and they will not be happy to if I raise this issue. So, as David said, that the fear, we have to come out of fear. Until and unless they keep us in fear, we cannot achieve anything. Everyone, you, me, David, and the government, they have to come out of fear. You have to stop them. If you don't stop, you will be tomorrow you will regret it. But today, if you don't stop it.
Yeah.
So Arif, what you're saying, David, this is coming to you. So what Arif is saying is basically that openly they are saying that I cannot take up issues which really need to be taken up, which are very sincere, very serious issues. There's so many lives being lost because of these incidents happening. Because I will upset my vote bank. Yes. Tell me one thing, are they supposed to serve their area or they're supposed to serve a vote bank? Where on earth is this politics heading, David? That is what is worrying.
Yeah, I mean, that's another really good question, Nandini. And I mean, but Arif's absolutely right. And I know this as well from, engagement with some people. They fully are aware of the problems. They know exactly what's happening. They're not stupid. But as Arif says, and this is across party, so it's not just one party. It's Labour, it's Conservative, it's Lib Dems, it's all the parties. They, in certain areas, rely on a margin for victory, a margin of votes coming from the voter bank. And it's not like necessarily it's all their votes, but it's the difference between them winning and keeping their seat in Parliament and not. And I mean, I would reference, I'll just name one here, Steve Baker, the Conservative MP for High Wycombe. I know that area. I used to live in it. And that was quite a few years ago now. He is reliant on a substantive number of voter bank. Like he just is. And so he tempers what he says based on that reality, because every 4 or 5 years, come election time, he needs people to vote for him. So the reality is, and this is the awful thing, Nandini, about some politicians at any rate, ultimately their loyalty is to getting re-elected, not to their constituents. The constituents are a means to an end. The end is them getting into power. That's one reason why I rail against the political class. I think there's more important things in getting into power. There's such things as right and wrong. But hey, that's me.
So the politicians are not going to fight elections on what they are going to do for the whole area, but they are getting trapped because just to win, they will do anything and everything, even if it is at the cost of safety of people who live in that area. This is a very, very, very worrying message going out. On that note.
Yeah, but you know something, Nandini, it wasn't like this if you went back in time like 25, 30 years. It's only as the immigration and the demographics of the UK have started to change, just like Arif says they've changed in France as well. It's this demographic change which is the fundamental driver of everything. And that's why I do believe that, and we touched on this, Arif, certainly looking very closely at the people who come into your country is important. Yes, we do, as you say, Arif, we have to also look at the people that are already here. So there's the two parts to the problem. And I think you have to look at them both together at the same time. But up until this point, we haven't paid any attention to who's come into the country, and we haven't paid any attention to what they're doing when they come here. And that's why we have the problem. It's really straightforward.
عارف جی ایک چیز یہ بتائیے کہ جو پالیٹکس کی باتیں ہو رہی ہیں کہ پالیٹیشینس کے لیے یہ ووٹ بینک ضروری ہے یا یہ ضروری ہے کہ ہم لوگ اس مدے پہ زیادہ بات کرتے ہیں کہ بھیا ہمارا تو یہ ووٹ بینک ہے، ہم سیکیور ہے تو ہم پہنچ جائیں گے، یہ زیادہ اہمیت رکھتا ہے، یہ نہیں کہ جو اس آپ کے ایریا میں جو لڑکیاں رہ رہی ہیں، جو باقی لوگ رہ رہے ہیں، ان کے مسئلے نہیں امپورٹنٹ ہے کیا؟ یہ تو بات اب سمجھ میں یہ آنی چاہیے ہم لوگوں کو، کیسے سمجھے کہ ہم تو پھنس گئے ہیں بیچ میں. ایک طرف پولیٹیشینز اپنی وہ کر رہے ہیں اور ایک طرف آپ اپیسمنٹ کی باتیں کر رہے ہیں، تو واٹ اباؤٹ؟
دیکھیں اس میں نان مسلم کمیونٹی ہے نا، وہ برابر کی ذمہ دار ہے. امریکہ میں آپ دیکھیں مسلمان ووٹر کلیئرلی کہہ رہا ہے کہ ہم بائیڈن کو ووٹ دیں گے، لیکن ہندو ووٹ ڈیوائیڈڈ ہے ابھی بھی. آپ کو بہت سارے ہندو کیمپین کرتے نظر آئیں گے بائیڈن کے لیے، وہ کہہ رہے نہیں 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 ہم تو یہ نہیں دیکھتے اور یہ اور وہ. تو یہ کمیونٹی، مسلمان کمیونٹی نے تو اپنی ہیجمنی قائم کی ہوئی اور اپنا خوف قائم کیا ہوا ہے، لیکن باقی کمیونٹی ہے نا وہ ان چیزوں میں نہیں پڑتی. وہ اگین وہی تھنگ کہ ہم تو سیکولر ہیں جی، ہم تو سیکولرزم پہ بلیو کرتے ہیں، ہمارا سناتن دھرم تو سیکولرزم پریچ کرتا ہے. ایگریڈ، لیکن یہ کس قسم کا سیکولرزم ہے کہ آپ سب ورژن میں جا رہے ہیں، آپ غلامی میں جا رہے ہیں دوسری کمیونٹی کے. آپ کو اس کو روکنے کے لیے اپنے آپ کو اسٹرانگ کرنا ہوگا. اور ڈیوڈ ایز یو سیڈ that because the protest in front of high commissions, it is happening and they have a supporter in Sadiq Khan. But these things happened when Boris Johnson was also mayor. These things are happening. When July 7 happened in London, it was not Sadiq Khan that there was a mayor, Christian mayor here. So this is happening no matter who is in which office. Even today, after what's happening in France, United Kingdom has issued support to France on some conditionals. They are not clearly saying that it is a mindset. The government of United Kingdom has to come strongly out of fear. Still they are fearing that what will happen if Muslims will come out with knives here. So what will we do then?
Yeah, well, I mean, actually, the BBC, in talking about the Nice terrorist attack, they put the word Islamist terrorist attack in parentheses, as if there was any doubt about it. Macron said it was an Islamist terrorist attack. The mayor of Nice said it was an Islamist terrorist attack. The BBC weren't sure. So, we do have, I mean, and also another thing is, it's because I think, and you make a great point there, Arif. I mean, what we've seen in London has been going on long since before Sadiq Khan came to power. It's because British society, I'm afraid, British political class are appeasers. They think that, and Winston Churchill understood the difference. He understood that, a appeaser is someone who thinks if you feed the crocodile, well, he'll eat you last. But you're still going to be eaten. You're still going to be consumed. And that's why he fought against appeasement policies back in 1939. In 2020, we have appeasement policies in place in London, across the UK. We won't stand up to radical Islam. We won't stand up against the radical mosques. We won't take action. And that means that they grow stronger, confident. They have massive influence in social media as well. I'm sure you understand. They can, I know from my own contacts, they can probably close down anybody that they want, because they've got good pals in high places. And so, so what is required is a government to actually get a backbone, stand up and say, enough appeasement, enough of this savagery, enough of this grooming, enough of this jihad, enough. But I think we're going to need a new class of politician, Arif, to do this. I don't think the people that are in power are fit for purpose.
David, one thing here. Now, if I go with you to Ilford, a London suburb, you will see young children in Arabic dress with a skull cap, a bag, going to mosque. Now tell me, these children, when they come from school, they learn something from school, and when they go to this mosque, the first lesson they get is that your colleague, which is not Muslim, will not go to paradise. So it is your duty to convert them. and you have to convert them. And this message is so strong to a young child. So why do we need madrasas? Why do we need mosque for preaching Islam? Mosque is a place only to pray 5 times. That's it. But these mosques are full all time. There is a Tablighi Jamaat who has come from Pakistan. They will address you. Now that Tablighi Jamaat for 2 hours addresses common Muslims and will poison in their mind. Why don't we stop it? These places, madrasas and mosques, they don't have any place in this free society. They don't have. They should not be allowed. This is the point. When this will happen?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. They should be, of course, closed down, and these people should not be allowed to come to our country to spread their poison. You're absolutely right on these things, Arif. This is exactly what needs to happen. And there is the point that you make. There is this dichotomy between, on the one hand, kids are sent to school and they're kind of supposed to be given some degree of pluralism and British values, but then they go to these places and they're taught the exact opposite. So I think that messes their minds up. It creates conflict in them, and these are young people, very impressionable young people, and so there are things we could do, but anything that we do is going to trigger a response from the respective community concerned. And we have to be prepared to take that. That's the thing. If we accept, they'll respond and we'll respond back, and we will use the forces of law and British law. That's all I'm saying. I don't want to do anything outside of the rule of law, but we will do that to ensure that we protect British values, British people of all faiths or no faiths. We will do that, and we will stand up against anybody or any group who threatens them. And, it just requires courage and fortitude, Arif. That's all we need. But isn't it sad that there's just not enough? Europe has not seen enough of that. We've not seen enough of it in France. We've not seen enough in Belgium. We've not seen in Holland. We've seen it all around Germany, and here in the UK as well. It's a common problem. In fact, actually, the only country that seems to be sort of half sensible is America, which has not allowed the problem to spread just as fast. Although in certain areas, as I'm sure you know, Minnesota and whatnot, it is becoming a real problem. But it actually does raise the fundamental issue as well: is radical Islam compatible with Western democracies? Yes or no? I don't think that the evidence suggests that it's not.
So, Arif ji and David, this is like, what is worrying is that how much is too much? How many more girls? How many more grooming incidents? And we're talking about this Islam. Look at what Iran used to be at the time of Shah. The women had the freedom to live life. They were also following Islam then, they are still. So you have a constant narrative that is going out to tell, as you said, Arif ji, this is happening and that is happening in the mosque. We need to take this threat as seriously as possible and address it as soon as possible. We can save so many young girls' lives because this is what is messing it up so badly. Why are we not taking this threat so seriously? Till when will this appeasement and putting this brushing under the carpet just because it keeps you safe, but it keeps a lot of other women, other girls who are somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, so unsafe and so vulnerable right now?
Well, Nandini, Iran is a great example of the danger we face. If you go back to 1978, which is not, it's certainly within my living memory, and you look at how women had freedom and girls had freedom to walk about without the garb of Islam on them, and then look how it changed so quickly. And this is why I think you're absolutely right to highlight the fact that we should be deeply concerned, because you can lose your freedoms very quickly. Nobody should take what they have for granted. And I think, unfortunately, too many in this country do. We could the United Kingdom could easily become like Iran. And I might say, and I don't know if Arif would agree, but there's parts of the United Kingdom in certain towns, in certain areas, which are already the same as Iran. It's happening, Nandini. It's happening. It's just that it hasn't happened everywhere. Freedom can be lost very quickly, and it's very hard to get it back, as you see in Iran. So I think we should look to Iran and we should say, we don't want to go down there, that route. and we're not going to be colonized by those who would have us as a sort of proto-Islamist state. We're not going to accept any of that, and that's why we need to take action. I'm sure you'd agree, Arif. It's now or never.
Well, David, I agree, but we have to face one bitter truth, is that what happened in Iran in 1979 was not overnight. Where Khomeini lived, from where did he launch his movement? From this
France.
Europe. He was living in Paris. He launched all the movement from Europe, and we kept quiet and we supported him to bring revolution in Iran. What was the situation of Kabul? Kabul was a liberal city. Afghanistan was a liberal society. We brought jihad. The West supported, the West invested in jihad and promoted jihad. And what we see in Afghanistan and in Iran and in Pakistan, we cannot say that it is only them. It is we in West also supported these movements. And now we are afraid that we will not fight them. Then don't be surprised after 25 years when we have Iran in London also. Situation like Iran and Kabul in London. Because the more you spend time with these, with closed eyes, the more fear will grow. And one day you have to fight. And I fear that if you do it late, there will be more destruction. So you have to do it as soon as possible. This society has to remain livable, because people are living in fear. You saw one video is viral that one man was attacked by two burqa-clad women on petrol pump. This was very viral. You also posted. This thing is happening in London. If we spend time with closed eyes, it will happen. We promoted jihad in Iran and in Afghanistan and in Pakistan. We have to accept it that yes, we did a mistake. Nobody is accepting it, because at that time we had to fight communism. But why did we do this?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I mean, absolutely right. I completely agree with you, Arif. You know, the unfortunate tendency is to think that that you can, for example, in Iran, like recently, when there was a sort of an uprising by the people of Iran against the mullahs, where was the West? Silent. They had nothing to say about it. And yet some of the greatest proponents of free speech that I know, for example, Rita Panini, who's a journalist down in Australia on their sort of Sky News, and her family fled Iran, and she's been brought up obviously in Australia, but she fully understands the tyranny that people there are having to live under. And it's shame on us in the West that we don't support people, freedom-loving people in Iran and other places, like you say, Arif. We should be doing that. And the thing is, we could lose our own freedom in the same way as the people there lost their freedom, and all for the same reason, because we stayed mute when we should have spoken up. That's what you have to do. You've got to speak up. It's never easy, as you know. It brings lots of problems, but you're doing the right thing if you stand against this kind of unspeakable evil, and that's what we're trying to do, I guess.
Thank you so much, David. Just last two things, coming from Arif and from David. Politics is playing its own game. They are on mute mode. They are on speaker mode. They are God knows on what mode. But do you know what? It is the girls that we feel for. What do you think as a society, as parents, as family members? आरिफ जी क्या करे कि ये चीजें अब और ना हो? आपका क्या मैसेज आ रहा है उस सोसाइटी, वो पेरेंट्स सब के लिए?
देखें, सोसाइटी के जो डिफरेंट कंपोनेंट्स हैं, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल पेरेंट्स के लिए अपने घर को मजबूत करें, अपनी तरबियत को स्ट्रॉन्ग करें, अपने बच्चों को सही चीजें सिखाएं, इग्नोर ना करें। ये सेक्युलरिज्म के नाम पे या इसके नाम पे या दुनिया क्या कहेगी, या इन चीजों से खौफ से निकलें। दूसरा, आप एक कम्युनिटी के खौफ से निकलें कि वो वायोलेंट है, तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि आप दबते रहोगे। देखें, हिंदू धर्म भी आपको युद्ध करने के लिए तलकीन करता है, अपने बिलीफ को कायम रखने के लिए। ये चीजें जरूरी हैं। ये तो पेरेंट्स के लिए मैसेज है। सोसाइटी के जो बड़े हैं, जो लिबरल्स हैं, जो स्कॉलर्स हैं, इन लोगों को आगे आके एक कोएग्जिस्टेंस के मैसेज को प्रमोट करना होगा, और कोएग्जिस्टेंस में आपको टारगेट करना होगा उन लोगों को जो कोएग्जिस्टेंस में बिलीव नहीं करते, जो अपना جو لٹریچر ہے, جو اپنی فلسفی ہے, وہ آپ پہ امپوز کرنا چاہتے ہیں. اینڈ تھرڈلی اینڈ موسٹ امپورٹنٹلی, گورنمنٹس کو آگے بڑھ کے لیجسلیشن کرنی ہوگی اور پاور کے ساتھ کچھ چیزوں کو کریکٹ کرنا ہوگا, کہ وقت آ گیا ہے کہ یہ چیزیں کریکٹ کرنی ہوں گی. آج فرانس کر رہا ہے, کل دوسرے کو کرنا پڑے گا. اور فرانس بھی ابھی تک فل پاور پہ نہیں آیا, لیکن مجھے نظر آ رہا ہے کہ بہت ضروری ہو گیا ہے. اور یہ فرانس کی جنگ چھوٹی موٹی جنگ نہیں ہے, اٹ ول ٹیک ٹائم. تو دوسری گورنمنٹس کو بھی اسٹرانگ ایکشن لینے ہوں گے, بیسک تبدیلی لانی ہوگی. اب بہت ہو گئی اپیسمنٹ. بنیادی بیسک تبدیلی جب تک نہیں لائیں گے اپنے سسٹمز میں, تب تک کچھ نہیں ہونے والا.
So same going to you, David. France, I think Macron has shown the conviction and the courage to take this evil head on. There are going to be costs, but at least he is doing something. What can the parents, the family, the society do to protect these girls so that we do not have another Rotterdam, we do not have another Huddersfield, we do not have this love jihad, which is becoming a big menace. We just cannot ignore it. What is your message going out?
Well, yeah, I think, the realities are that, as I think Arif just probably said there, you do need to tackle it from several different stances. It's not just a one fix that you have to do. So there is the issue for parents. Absolutely have a responsibility to be aware of what their kids are doing, and to make sure that if there is a problem that they're aware of, then that they inform the necessary authority. So there's a parental responsibility. Actually, there's a school responsibility. Mostly these schools have a level of responsibility as well, I think, in this matter too. Again, if they suspect anything that's wrong, they should be directing it to the authorities. Police have a responsibility. The police have to act. They have to enforce the rule of law in these communities. Last of all, I guess, the politicians have a responsibility, and their responsibility has to be to ensure that, again, British society, everyone living in this country is kept safe. The number one rule of any government is to keep its people safe. These girls are not safe. They haven't been safe, Nandini, for many decades. Isn't it time that all these groups actually found a bit of courage, a bit of backbone, and actually stood up for the safety of these girls and indeed future generations?
Thank you so much, David. So what we are trying to say that girls as young as 11 have been victims. We need to start becoming slightly more vigilant. Is the girl doing something different than what she normally does? Is she staying out with friends whom she normally does not stay out with? Is she bringing home expensive gifts? Is she keeping a lot of things that she normally used to tell? She is not telling you. These are the crucial signs. Talk to her. There is something, which we need to communicate. If she's spending more time talking on phone, whatever it is, there are these signs which are visible. And we cannot, just look at it the other side. We need to look at it so much more seriously. This is literally knocking on your doorstep. This is happening not in one particular country, on one particular area. It is across the board. Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, and we seeing it just happen everywhere, whether you call it love jihad or grooming. On that note, thank you so much, Arif, and thank you so much, David, for your time. Really appreciate on talking on this very important subject of grooming affecting us. Thank you.